With your kind attention, but we're Jews, please keep eating. Of course, it is the custom to hear the shofar, sound the shofar every morning up until Rosh Hashanah. So for those who haven't heard it yet, I'll sound shofar. So I'm sorry to interrupt your eating. You know, swallow what is ever in your mouth. And then please rise. Be seated. Yeah. Oh, thank you. I practiced with the kids downstairs, so it's like, don't be so impressed. But of course, what's really exciting for this just wonderful weekend, yesterday was beautiful and just so exciting to be able to honor people that we're excited about honoring them and knowing how much they and their families appreciated the honor. We were so lucky to be treated by a short talk by Rachel Weiner-Apter, who, of course, we are understandably quite proud of. And now we get to really hear a little bit of our own history, the history of our congregation and our community, with the person in Morris County who probably knows more about Morris County and the Jewish community here than anyone else. She's been working on it for years. And thanks to Linda, we are very happy that our board has decided to include our records with the records of the Jewish Historical Society, which means that they will be preserved. And that 70 years from now, at our 140th anniversary, sadly, I'm afraid most of us will not be there. On the other hand, our grandchildren and great-grandchildren will be able to see all this material and probably even have a recording of Linda's talk. So I'm just going to, without any more introduction, you are here to hear her, not me. You get plenty of opportunities. So I'm going to turn this over to Linda.
Is that right? I thought about it. Well, let's make sure that you can hear me. You may be sorry about that. But before we start the program, I have a confession to make. I am not tech savvy. And where many of you are concerned if the shoe fits, wear it. I've hired a genealogist quite a while ago to trace my Jewish roots and learned that I am a Levi and a Soloveitchik. Now, Rabbi might be able to explain that a little better and my connection to a very large branch of Jewish tradition, Soloveitchik. But I am fortunately with that genealogist, I've indicated that I have nothing in common with Bill Gates. And that to me, Wi-Fi stands for why fight it. So you fight them or join them. So therefore, I will start by saying good morning. Some of the best advice I have ever been given came from Louis Bamberger, owner of the great glamorous department store L. Bamberger and Company, who said, if you get a good offer, you should take it, which is what I did when I accepted your gracious invitation to present a program that I have called The History of White Meadow Temple, Then and Now. So let's begin. On your screen there, I believe you will see this particular cover. I know that I have billed this talk, The History of White Meadow Temple, Then and Now, but I thought I would let a younger generation of White Meadow Temple's youngsters get top billing. It was Liza Miller, I don't know if they're still around or in this area or members, at age 9, who in 2014 decided to research and write the history of White Meadow Temple for her social studies class. Now, you might want to check out the letter that I wrote to her, because for somebody like me who loves history, to have a 9-year-old be interested in history, this is a gift of the gods. So I will leave it on the table closest you might want to check out what she did. She did a good job. So So let's begin. Does it work? Thank you to the president who's tech savvy. White Meadow Temple was officially incorporated on the 31st day of July 1952. From the outset, it would be described as a country shul located in the town of Rockaway and not known by many people outside of its small surrounding area. Initially, White Meadow Lake was promoted as a summer community by an energetic builder by the name of Benjamin Klein. You'll be familiar with a lot of these photos. It was Klein who I can't reinvent history, I only can report it. It was Klein who posted this iconic advertisement for White Meadow Lake in a promotional campaign for his National House and Farms Association. White Meadow Lake, we are told, was just 55 miles from New York City, whereby city residents were convinced to purchase summer homes in White Meadow Lake immediately following World War II. As an aside, Benjamin Klein was also responsible for the development of another Jewish community located in neighboring Lake Hiawatha. That same year, we're told 150 vacation houses were sold. Owners became neighbors, and neighbors gradually got to know one another, but there was little interest in what one historian reported to me said was any priority concerned with spiritual needs, that is, until the following summer, when interest in spending the high holidays together at White Meadow Lake became evident. White Meadow Lake quickly developed a reputation as a Jewish area. At this point in its history, how are we doing? Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, I have no problem. If you want to look at me, it's quite all right. I'm not on the wall of any post office saying wanted, dead or alive. My pleasure. I'm glad I got my hair done. I'm sorry about my asides, but okay. It's a nice morning, even if it rains. White Meadow Lake quickly developed a reputation as a Jewish area. At this point in its history, it was pointed out that White Meadow Temple was being constructed in an area that had not much contact with Jewish people. If anything, and this is a startling photo every time I see it, there was a strong feeling of anti-Semitism throughout most of Morris and Sussex counties vis-a-vis this photograph taken of the German-American Bund located in the neighboring town of Andover. That a Jewish community could grow and prosper at a time in an area where anti-Semitism was present is all the more remarkable. The first services, this is what I read, were held at the home of B. and Bob Silverberg. Does anybody know differently? Good, cooperate. Located on Lakeshore Drive. And the two people most associated with being the driving force to establish a synagogue building were Martha Silvershine and Louis Blank. The first years that service were held, White Meadow Temple was still under construction. There was a frame and a roof, but no outside walls. And to add insult to injury, it was a wet and windy day. The synagogue's first rabbi, Rabbi Jacob Whiteman, arrived in 1955, and by 1958, White Meadow Temple was holding its first bat mitzvah class. Rabbi Whiteman, frequently described as the right man for the right time, was astute enough to realize the concerns of local Rockaway residents toward an influx of Jews to the area. So he sought to educate neighboring Gentiles about Jewish traditions and customs. This, in my mind, was the way to establish lines of communication between the two groups. 70 years later, this tradition of maintaining strong community relationships is reflected by your participation in something that I read about and known as Rise Up Rockaway. When I read the small print under what I see in your bulletin, it's merely described this way: Rockaway Interfaith Services to empower the underprivileged and powerless, which now includes Holy Trinity Lutheran Church, White Meadow Temple, and St. Cecilia's Catholic Church. Establishing a brotherhood, nice word, among men was also reflected in one of your earlier synagogue bulletins. In this issue, featuring Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., was both timely and spoke to this congregation's members' long-standing commitment to social activism then and now. Note the speaker of the day, Deborah Prinz. She is the daughter of world-renowned Rabbi Joachim Prinz, which is a story for another day and worth knowing about. Anybody familiar with Rabbi Prinz? Okay, so you know that he was on this platform when Martin Luther King gave his I Have a Dream speech, et cetera, and hosted Martin Luther King Jr. at the synagogue that he was Rabbi B'nai Abraham in Newark. But I won't digress. This is your day. Opened in 1952, White Meadow Temple's growing membership led to a 1964 groundbreaking ceremony for renovations and additions to the building. So featured from, at least I think on the screen from left to right, are Ken Friedman, Irving Rifkin, Rabbi Whiteman, and Bennett Silvershine. Nice to see. Oh, well. And this iconic photograph featuring Martha Silvershine, considered to be the founding mother of White Meadow Temple, with First Lady, yes, Eleanor Roosevelt. The year is 1956. Now, Mrs. Roosevelt was spoken many places throughout what we call this Greater MetroWest Jewish community. But this, I think, is quite wonderful. Indeed, two First Ladies. How about that? What has made life considerably easier for a historian, which I like to bill myself as, interested in Jewish life in Morris County, is being able to rely on the New Jersey Jewish News. This has been the paper of record for Jews living in what is known as the Federation of Greater MetroWest since 1947. White Meadow Temple and the community that grew up around White Meadow Lake has received its fair share of coverage. For example, I don't know, people don't save their back issues quite exactly. White Meadow Lake described as a close-knit community, or this particular slide, Journey Through Time, which was a featured story in the Jewish News. The story informed Jewish news readers that White Meadow Lake's Jewish community was preparing a pictorial exhibition titled Rockaway, New Jersey, Jewish Community, A Journey Through Time, 1945 to 1985. So while I was wandering around waiting for everybody to finish and eat, I stepped out into your lobby and I checked that you've held on to many of the photographs that appeared in that exhibit. I want to leave with them, but that's a story for another day. The exhibit featured at White Meadow Temple and other Morris County venues, because it did travel, described the mold of multiple Jewish organizations whose members, chances are, held its meetings at the synagogue or at the clubhouse. And I want to mention them because I don't know if they still are active here now and in this community, but they're worthy of a mention because there's a reason that I am. Women's American Org, White Meadow Lake Chapter in cooperation with B'nai B'rith Women Tikva Chapter, UJC of Metro West Community Relations Committee, White Meadow Rockaway Hadassah, Rockaway UJA, White Meadow Temple, and the Temple's Men's Club and Sisterhood. What this suggests, at least to me, is that White Meadow Lake has grown a full-fledged Jewish community connected by Jewish organizations that reinforced, in my mind, the idea that its residents were welcome to live and raise their families in a Jewish world. Likewise, is this feature story, Rockaway Temple celebrates a half-century anniversary. Now, I have always maintained that all history is personal and that I happily have personal history with your congregation. In 2000, I was hired by the Jewish Historical Society to be the outreach director for Morris, Sussex. My job was to find, acquire, and exhibit the history of Jewish life in these two counties. My very first interview on that job, I should say passion, was with your much beloved Rabbi Jacob Whiteman, and it was he who permitted me to take the synagogue records from this building's basement in order to put them into the Jewish Historical Society's climate-controlled archive vault for long-term preservation. Well, fast forward, and it's not in my notes, but I have been here quite a few times, also sitting in that basement with all these records in metal file cabinets. And I managed to have Stephanie, she's more than cooperative, bring them to the library. And of course, I read them and I noted them. And I realized, oh my God, it's 20 years since I've been here. And what's going to happen to the history sitting in this moldy basement? This is when I wore a mask before any of the COVID existed. It was called Librarians Lung. And let me tell you, I did. In any event, I learned that your board of trustees were meeting on one of the days I was here. And I asked Mindy for permission, and a rabbi, of course, the two go together, that could I come and make an appeal to take what's here now, 20 years later. And you know what? It didn't take him any time to debate. Very unusual. Nobody apparently dissented. And I picked them up on a subsequent day visiting here. And now they too are added to your collection. And what I think is unique for the fact that we have synagogues in Greater MetroWest that go back to 1896. The three largest collections are synagogue collections sitting in Whippany, happen to be Morristown Jewish Center. They think they're the oldest, but they're not. Pinebrook is. And Ob Sholom, which is the third oldest synagogue in New Jersey. And White Meadow Temple. So you are the third Lord. Now think about it. But I say all the more power to you. Well, I have not done specific research on each of your rabbis. I focused on Rabbi Whiteman as he was the first. Other full-time rabbis, thank you, Susie Wainer, for identifying them, include rabbis Ralph Dolan, Leslie Flipson, and I think it should be the flip way, Benjamin Adler, and your current rabbi, Rabbi Charlie Popke. I won't ask him to raise his hand to identify himself. I have also spent considerable time reading the minutes of your board of trustees, the ones that were handwritten. They were a killer. As far back as 2000, I became aware and probably never thought about the relationship that boards of trustees and congregations have with your rabbis. Rabbis have formal contracts with their respective congregations, whereby both maintain a mutual respect for what each other does. Well, so I have to smile as I recall how several members of your boards of trustees requested the rabbi at that time to please attend their meetings. And the rabbi's response to the request was that he'd be happy to come as long as the board members attended his services. So I thought it was a classic. Maybe the rabbi doesn't, but I did think so. So is this what we call quid pro quo? So now I took this photo more than 20 years ago. So yes, I'm not telling you a falsehood. I have been connected to your synagogue as far back as your 50th anniversary celebration. That was held at Morristown Headquarters Plaza. I was on hand, as were you, Barbara, etc., to watch the festivities and thinking of the words to the Jersey Boys song, "Oh, What a Night." And it was. Clearly, as you will see, a good time was had by all. And this is where Rabbi Whiteman outdid himself. So let's watch, please. Anybody see yourself or who is there? Okay, okay. Oh, pray that this works.
Chairman, Rabbi Lipson, Mayor Susie, very dear friends. Stu, someone said at the table that they hope that your introduction will do me justice. So it reminded me it's important that the Senator in his office and the Senator said to the plaintiff, please do me justice. He whispered to his assistant, said, with this guy's face, he needs more than justice, he needs a little mercy. Stu, thank you so much for your kind words. You did me justice and mercy. It's really so great to be here, to be part of such a wonderful and exciting simcha. I missed the weekend. I heard so much about Friday night and Shabbat morning. As many of you, most of you know, I was a rabbi for 34 years, which is a very major part, 50-year period. It's good to see so many, I'm not going to say old faces. Good to see friends of long ago. Some as far back as 1955 when I came to the community. Some were children in the religious school. Just spoke to one and reminded her of all of our classmates who they were at that time. So it's great to see that White Meadow Temple has retained your friendship, your loyalty, your support. But I'm even more happy to see members of the next generation who grew up in White Meadow Lane, went to the religious school, were involved in our various youth programs. To see you here brings me a lot of pleasure and much joy in office.
How about that? Well, I have included a few photos of those in attendance. You recognize yourself, lady? Next. Wow, how nice. Good memories. And I think I did 3 of them. Am I good with 3? I think so. So I'll just leave that there for a second. And I did. Here are the photos. But here's an offer I hope you cannot refuse. For those of you who would like to view this video in its entirety, you can contact the synagogue office. Stephanie, where are you? And because whatever. Okay, she'll surface. She's ubiquitous. For those of you who would like to view this video in its entirety, you can contact the synagogue office to request that an email that you would like a link to the video, and they will forward it. So it may be you're there, maybe somebody that you want to remember was there. And happily, when I say this, because it was on a VHS format, there are no commercials. The more I research the history of White Meadow Lake and White Meadow Temple, the more it has become evident to me that it would take endless hours for me to mention the names of all the individuals who have played a significant role in reaching your milestone 70th anniversary. So they would be officers and board members and men's club members and sisterhood members. You know who you are. If you've held any office here in some official capacity, I won't ask you to stand or we'll be here forever. So why don't you just raise your hand, you, Mr. President, right? So we've got some representation. Sure, that's great. Getting involved in synagogue life, which of course I think back at one time, synagogue was everybody's life. There were bris and there were this and all the events were there and it was the center of your world. Things have changed, but it doesn't mean that you cannot find a wonderful community here. I'm looking at it. So therefore I might add that I should say you are the reason, or they are the reason that White Meadow Temple is celebrating its 70th. Without leadership, it ain't going nowhere. Sorry about that. So chances are, and this is, of course, a fundraising activity, but it gives people an opportunity to thank people who have put their efforts forth to make the temple successful, to provide Jewish life, and et cetera, and so forth. So I was able to capture for the archives. You can see the cover of the 25th, the 40th, the 50th, and now you will eventually, I hope I'll actually acquire a copy of your 70th. Arlene Zimmerman, are you around about that? Okay, right, I remember, okay. Well, previously mentioned in this commemorative journal, and this is the one I want to focus on again, it has to come with kudos because this was not only a commemorative journal, it tells the story when you open the pages and you have a copy, which is well worth the read. It tells White Meadow's story. I don't know if she's still alive, but the project director for what happened that was so meaningful was her Rebecca Marcus. Any relatives? Is she in the area? Is she? I don't know. She's in Morris Plains. Oh, no fooling. Oh, she's going to be surprised. Very good. Well, you know, researchers follow all leads, and I think research is the key to all history. So likewise, I've walked through the building. I've glimpsed the kids, you know, in daycare and whatever. So I know clearly if you actually pay attention, many of us don't after a while, it just becomes part of, you know, just what surrounds you, that there is history on the walls of this synagogue. I took the photos. I'm no Richard Avedon. So we have to credit Wolfson. And of course, the building rededication in 1985. You see the plaque below. And this, of course, the Tree of Life. I don't think I've been in any synagogue at any place, anywhere, certainly not in MetroWest, where synagogues do not have trees of life. Now here, I'm not supposed to make a pitch for donations, but I see in your newsletter and your bulletin that there's always this little note on the bottom, because I read them, that always asks, why don't you take or, you know, create or add a Tree of Life little leaf to it, commemorating somebody important in your life, because it is a nice thing to do, and B, it's a good fundraiser. $360, says your bulletin. So in anticipation for this program about White Meadow history, I recently arranged to meet up with several long-standing members of White Meadow Temple at a diner in Wharton, arranged by Seymour Geltzoller. And you know them, standing from left to right, Steve and Maddie Lashin, David Horowitz. Is David here today? So you know you were there, right? I have documentary evidence, and I know where you spend your winters too, by the way. And Seymour Geltzoller, and seated left to right, Barbara Drench, that way. And Fran Ticker. Fran, are you here? Oh my God, you are the walking history. You should be doing this. And well, you gave me both contact, you know, your cell phone, et cetera, and so forth. You may be sorry. Okay. Me, you know, yours truly, Riva Geltzoller and Susie Wayner. An appropriate caption, if I thought about a caption for a photo, I think I would probably call it, "You ought to be in pictures." Well, what may come as a surprise to each of them, all of you who are here, is that I already secured a commitment from the editor of the New Jersey Jewish News, Joanne Palmer, to do a feature story about White Meadow Temple's 70th anniversary. I didn't release that information until I told the rabbi a few days ago, at which time each of them, depending on their or your city here, your availability, will join with Rabbi Charlie to tell your story to the Greater MetroWest community. Now, I have to think about the fact when I come onto Hibernia, I think about Rockaway and its play in terms of its iron ore mines that played into the American Revolution. So I have to think about Ben Franklin and this idea of keeping a secret. Franklin used to say, 3 people can keep a secret only if 2 of them are dead. I don't suggest that for here, but he did say it. I'm a researcher. So mine is an appreciation of how White Meadow Temple members are truly family. Births, deaths, and all of life's milestones are recorded on the pages of your synagogue bulletins then and now. So now is the operative word. Just like my time spent reading your Board of Trustee minutes, I have been reading more recently your monthly synagogue bulletins. I just didn't stumble, and you can't see how high that pile is. It represents 2019 through 2022. On this pile of synagogue bulletins, they are a result of a request I made to your synagogue administrator, Stephanie Adams, to print what I call the COVID editions of your bulletin and to meet me in the lot of Morristown's King's Supermarket to retrieve them from her. Somebody like me goes anywhere if there's history at the other end. But I will say, I see her in the back of the room. She is one woman you can set your clock by. And she gave me, I think, and when we met up, she said, I knew you'd come on time. Actually, I was there early, what? And I've also, and I have to say this too, that I've gotten the same remarkable cooperation with each of my requests from your financial administrator, Mindy Fast. Mindy? What most, if not all of us need to acknowledge is that COVID-19 has left a permanent imprint on our lives going forward, and where the word Zoom has taken on new meaning. It never used to be a noun. Now it is. It was always a verb, but that's what the dictionary has done. It has just added the word Zoom as a noun. Go figure. So likewise, keeping children and adults of all ages engaged in synagogue life has been no small task. Now, I spoke with the rabbi when I was here more recently, and it seems to me that he has been able to negotiate the waters of the CDC and social distancing, not that, to quote Stephanie, we agreed on. I don't know what's sociable about distancing, maybe physical, but that's what you did do. Alternate rows. I mean, he's kept it going, and I admire his persistence and your cooperation. So I'll repeat, likewise, keeping children and adults of all ages engaged in synagogue life has been no small task. I turn to your recent synagogue bulletins, where I became a fan of Rabbi Charlie's monthly column. I hope, Rabbi, you show up. Are you there? Good. Mahashavot. Yes, absolutely. Aren't you amazed that I was able to kind of swipe that off? I didn't have a photo of you. Better watch your step. Which Rabbi told me means, you told me it means thoughts. I looked for it because I was married to an Israeli. It didn't ring any bells, but that's not unusual. Far be it from me to disagree with Rabbi Charlie. However, I will have to say that I've read his monthly column all through those years, and I actually think on many occasions they border on a sermon. And I did, having read them, learned a great deal about Judaism and the role it plays in each of our lives. So I say thank you, Rabbi. I was also pleased to read that the synagogue's new website, prepared by Stephanie Adams, has led to requests from outside communities for more information regarding programming at White Meadow Temple. I love just the idea of Shabbat on the beach, or for that matter, Shluffy Shabbat, and everything in between, because I'm assuming you get the bulletin. And I also, because when I came in, I wanted a regular reminder to thank your caretaker, John Axon, for securing the building and keeping the air conditioning running. Too bad, or maybe I'm glad it didn't work in the basement too well, because that's how I got all the records. There are not enough ways to emphasize that for current and future members of this synagogue, there will always be a need for creative ways to fund the temple's activities. And it can be as simple, because I read your newsletter, as simple as ShopRite Script. And this new I was not aware of is Amazon Smile, a fundraising opportunity whereby if you shop on Amazon, the internet giant, not that Jeff Bezos is suffering from lack of income, will donate a portion of the purchase price to the synagogue or income from items purchased at the Myra H. Silverman Sisterhood gift shop. These are all sources of revenue. But what impresses me is the income, because some of you are not guilty of this, but fall into this category, that come from individuals and businesses who month after month place ads in your synagogue building. I'm sure there's some reciprocity when you shop in their stores and they ask, how did you hear about me? You say, I read it in the Temple Bulletin. Well, we all know that these are small sources of revenue that requests for members to participate in the synagogue's legacy program or to pay membership dues in a timely fashion are a must. Being able to maintain a full-service synagogue such as this, one that meets the needs of all age groups, is ongoing. It doesn't stop at the Jewish holidays. It goes forward. So the future of this synagogue, from my last slide, I don't want to wear out my welcome, is this particular, well, no, actually, I'm going to go back. It reinforces what Rabbi Charlie in one Mashavaot messages, reminding us that the times they are a-changing. Are there any Yiddish speakers in the room? So if I say, was ist nicht du, what was and will not come again, bilingual, trilingual, what about that? And that, my question is how so? I'm going to click on this again. From 450 families in its heyday, White Meadow Temple, according to what I read, is now a much smaller synagogue with an estimated 125 member families, but it is now affectionately described in Federation terms as small but mighty. I was, however, happy to read that despite the pandemic, that there has been a rise in membership, especially among younger families. This is good. Now, this is a slide I probably want to hold. I have not read your recent Board of Trustee minutes. Instead, I've looked to your synagogue bulletin for a discussion about White Meadow Temple's future. And this is one bulletin, the one you see on the screen, that I read very carefully because it's dated April 2022. And it reads, the congregation voted overwhelmingly to approve changing the name of White Meadow Temple to Or Hadash. You all know about this? Okay, that means you're reading your bulletin or you're just speaking among yourselves, which will require an amendment to the synagogue's bylaws. And Or Hadash, I learned, means new light. And it comes, thank you, Rabbi, from the first blessing before the Shema in the daily liturgy. Yes? Okay. Why the name change? Rabbi Whiteman of blessed memory indicated that the name should have been changed years ago. As the demographics of this community have changed with longtime members selling their homes, spending half of the year in warm weather states like Florida and Arizona, or pass away, it was felt that the name White Meadow Temple was just for residents of White Meadow, hence the suggestion that the congregation market to a larger geographical area. Alas, as Rabbi Charlie pointed out, Judaism has changed and the synagogue of the 21st century is unlikely to function according to the models of the 20th century, hence Or Hadash. What other changes require a mention? It is the closing of Flanders Temple Hatikva and the announcement that its Rabbi Daniel Zucker will be joining the staff of this congregation for the upcoming, I hope I got this right, 22 and 23 year. And if you've held on to your July synagogue bulletin, you can read about Rabbi Zucker's remarkable career. I had a nice conversation with him before the announcement made that that synagogue was closing. Well, now looking to the future. Next generation membership at White Meadow Temple in small script is written because having a Jewish community is important to us, to all of us. So where can you find this history? There's always a political announcement. In the archives of the Jewish Historical Society, we welcome researchers and would be pleased to add any forthcoming historic documents to your existing collections. Finally, I want to say thank you to all of those who gave me the opportunity to speak about the history of White Meadow Temple then and now. It is never too early to wish you and yours a happy new year, 5782, and of course, a hearty Mazel Tov. And so therefore, I will just merely say, White Meadow Temple is celebrating 70 years. Nobody got up to dance. So this is good. Now, this is the end because I don't want to wear out my welcome because I think there's history sitting here now. And I'd like to give anybody an opportunity to maybe mention that something that I couldn't include because after a while, nobody listens to a speaker. Nobody's entitled to more than 38 minutes of anybody's attention on a Sunday morning, with or without bagels, as the case may be. But yeah, okay, lady. Yeah.
We drove up here in 1953 when our first child was 2 months old. And when we drove in, I said to Marvin, camp for adults. I said, when we buy a house, and that was before the synagogue. We moved in 59, and I'm looking around here. We produced rabbis, cantors, lay leaders, heads of Hillel, heads of all kinds of Jewish organizations right here from this community. Martha Silvershine sponsored a scholarship for Camp Ramah, which my girls won. I gave it back. I said, give it to somebody who doesn't need it. But that was the beginning of my girls absolutely loving their Jewishness. The camp was, to me, filthy, ugly, but it had a library. And that's where the kids studied and they learned, and they're the best Jews of any community that I can give you. We watched them yesterday, your kids, everybody's kids. Sure, I can't, there's not a table here that doesn't have somebody who's been affected by the Jewishness that they learned here. So thank you, everybody, for contributing to the world. Come on up.
No. I forgot to mention yesterday when I was standing up there, thanking everyone, that the kosher butcher was not the thing that drew Nancy and I to this community. It was driving up White Meadow Road and seeing on the mailboxes that every other name on the street was Jewish. And then yesterday, Karen Siegel Monchar. Yeah, Whiteman, right? She told me that when she was here in the early 60s, oh yeah, I have to preface, that was in 1974 for Nancy and I. But when she was here in the 60s, it was almost 75% Jewish. And secondly, I just want to say one other thing that White Meadow Temple was noted for, that we had prominent speakers, guest speakers that came to White Meadow Temple. For example, Mayor Koch was a speaker here, and Elie Wiesel, and the controversial speaker, Mayor Kahana, Rabbi Kahana was also a speaker here, but that I remember. So that's what I wanted to say.
Yeah, absolutely. Anybody want to take a turn? Come on. This is called a Star is Born.
Well, we moved here. We did not get to see much of Rabbi Whiteman in White Meadow Temple. He was going to retire. But when we moved down to Florida, it turns out that he also lived in the same community. So we got to see him at the Orthodox Temple in Century Village. And we got to see him at special programs there, and he gave some lecture. We saw, I think, 2 lectures where he talked about his beginnings in the Lower East Side. He was such a marvelous speaker, but we missed most of his venue here at White Meadow Temple, which is unfortunate.
Anybody take a turn? Are we good? Madam French, yes? Okay. Okay. Great.
Hi, everybody. I don't have the history of White Meadow Temple. Actually, Sue, I'm looking at Sue. Bernie and I came to White Meadow in 2017, and I feel like we're given the task of carrying the history on in White Meadow Temple. So one of the reasons I asked for the microphone is that I've been tasked with some wonderful people to continue and to look for new members and to continue on the tradition. And we need the help of all of you to do that. So if I knock on your door and ask to help out, please know that it's with the idea that we celebrate with Linda again in maybe 20 years, and that Lily, who's sitting in the back as our youngest member, can be here enjoying the history and having the next generation enjoy. So we're coming out of COVID, yay, and let's build community. That's what makes this place so special, and reach out and expand. So thank you guys.
Okay, Rabbi, it's your show.
So obviously anyone wants to speak to Linda afterwards certainly may do so. We really want to extend our thanks to her for all that she has done in the entire community in her role. And of really being the historian in many ways for Morris County Jewish community, both advocating for the Morris County and now chronicling so articulately its history and understanding the people. And we appreciate that she took her time to join us this morning and to prepare this history just of our synagogue. That's that we will always have and we will always be able to treasure. So just so you know, there is all kinds of interesting connections. I mean, I've told many of you the story that when I came and I received from the Rabbinical Assembly the questionnaire on White Meadow Temple, and I'm reading it and I'm thinking, why does all this sound familiar? I'd never been to Rockaway. Yes, from Wilkes-Barre to New York City, I passed it many times on 80, but I had no idea. Hibernia or Rockaway, I always thought that was interesting. What's there? But then I get to the end where they list the rabbis that had been here. And sure enough, I see Rabbi Ralph Dallin. Well, while Ralph was here, I was the rabbi of his parents' synagogue in San Francisco. So I used to hear about White Meadow all the time when Ralph and Hetty would come in, and they would talk about how wonderful the congregation was. His parents would always talk about how much they loved coming out to visit. So that was, I found a very funny connection. And I did, the summer before I came, I was up teaching at Camp Ramon, Canada, and I met somebody from Toronto who happens to be Rabbi Leslie Lipson's sister. And she said, oh, it's a great community. They are wonderful. And they have one of the best speakers in the world. And of course, we know that's Nancy. The reputation of White Meadow Temple really is spread far and wide, and that's due to the incredible membership that it has had over the years and continues through, even with our small but mighty congregation. So we hope that everyone has had an incredible weekend. It's really been wonderful, beautiful, and so many thanks to Arlene and her committee. If I start naming names, I'll forget somebody, and I don't want to do that. And thank you all for being here and sharing, whether it's the whole weekend, part of the weekend. You're what makes our congregation fabulous. And thank you very much.